eye health a function of nutrition? So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a whistle-stop tour through the major imbalances or conditions of the eye and see what nutrition and or nutrients and what role they can have to play in the health of the eye. So here's the contents. It's the intention anyway. We're going to learn about the 4 most common eye disorders and the most pertinent nutritional considerations, as well as the most common, perhaps functional disorder called dry eyes or dry eye syndrome. We'll learn about how specific nutritional intervention could help prevent these disorders. These things do take decades to manifest. And we're going to learn about the key role of nutrients, particularly vitamin A, zinc, lutein, zeaxanthin, and vitamin E and vitamin C in particular. And those have been studied most with regard to the eye. We'll learn about which foods supply nutrition for ocular health. And I look forward to sharing that with you. I prepared it into a very simple graphic form so we can see which ones score the highest in nutrients we're looking for, and perhaps which supplements to consider to support eye health. And we're going to learn about the dangers of blue light. More about that towards the end of this presentation. So here's any, it is any person's eye, it's not mine, although it could be mine, it's a similar colour. And you can see that the different fibres in the eye, and the fibres have been likened to silk. That's actually silk, cotton, net, and hessian, the 4 types, and then there are different constitutions and so on that give certain characteristics. And effectively, the right eye is a reflection of the tissues in the right-hand side of the body, except for in the head, where it's the left-hand side, and vice versa for the other eye. This conversation is about nutrition for the eye, and here's the anatomy of the eye as a perfunctory view, but please look on the right-hand side under the optic nerve. You can see the macula lutea, and this will become relevant later. And look at the retina as well, because we're referring to the retina, which is where tissue damage and oxidative stress occurs in these eye conditions, and you can see the optic nerve too. So optic nerve, macula lutea, and the retina. Have a look at those, and that's the anatomy of the eye. Not for you to remember specifically. So it is a complex and fragile structure. It's amazing, isn't it, the eye? Amazing. Its various components are susceptible to disease, disability, and aging, and nutrition plays a vital role, not only, of course, in every single organ, but particularly with the eye. Hugely important, as we'll learn. The 4 most common eye conditions are age-related macular degeneration, which is abbreviated to AMD, cataracts, which is what we saw in India when we went to attended the eye camp in 1994, thousands of cataracts, in fact, glaucoma, and diabetic retinopathy. My intention is to sort of share with you the nuts and bolts of those conditions and how nutrients and specific antioxidants can help protect against that, as well as talk to you about dry eyes, which I'm going to do in the first instance. It's probably the most common thing that we might see is functional medicine practitioners and or nutritional therapists, as opposed to the others. It's a common thing having dry eye syndrome or dry eyes. It affects variously 5 to 34% of the people, depending on which population group you're looking at. And among older people, it can affect up to 70%. The DES is the abbreviation for dry eye syndrome. It also has other names with other abbreviations, and effectively it's having dry eyes. And the other symptoms can be associated with it, such as irritation around the eyes, redness, discharge of a non-lubrication kind, and easily fatigued eyes, therefore impacting our quality of life and ability to read. Blurred vision may also occur, and symptoms can range from mild and occasional to severe and continuous. If the eyes are too dry, you can lead to scarring of the cornea, these are caused by tiny abrasions if the dry eyes are there for too long. And there can be changes in the epithelium, which can lead to pathologic changes, namely squamous metaplasia and loss of goblet cells. Some severe cases can result in other defects, which you can read there. So dry eyes goes from a mild irritation to a significant eye condition. The causes, well, effectively what happens with dry eyes is the tears are not able to be made at the same rate at which they evaporate, essentially. And I think contact lens might be one of the most common causes. I've also had patients with meibomian gland dysfunction. I've never had a patient come in specifically with that as a priority issue. It wasn't their main issue on the questionnaire, for example, but they have had that as something going on in the background, but they were aware that there's not much that could be done about it, and they've been taking artificial tears for years and nothing changed, and it seems that they'd got confirmation that there was a genetic blockage in their tear duct leading from the meibomian gland, and they use tears. And otherwise they're unaffected. Allergies could contribute to this. Pregnancy can. You may be familiar with Sjogren's syndrome, the autoimmune condition which Venus Williams, the tennis player, has. That can lead to dry eyes. Doesn't have to, but it may do. Vitamin A deficiency could do as well. And sometimes the laser surgery is conducted. That can also lead to dry eyes, as well as certain medications. A diagnosis is mostly based on symptoms, though other tests can be used. The treatment naturally depends on the underlying cause, but although artificial tears, as I've been talking about, are the usual first line of treatment, apparently there are some wraparound glasses that fit close to the face that may decrease wear and tear in terms of tear evaporation. Rather like cyclists guarding against the wind in the eyes, but I have never seen those in practice. Dr. Mark Grossman is an ophthalmic doctor, and he's got a holistic approach which is really refreshing, and it makes complete sense because there's so much nutrition involved in eye health, and he maintains that dry eye health is directly related to the entire body and is connected to the whole body, and so effectively there's an underlying health condition should dry eyes manifest, which is the way that I would see things, and I'm sure we as functional medicine and or holistic practitioners would view it. Natural enough, proper hydration is vital, as well as the regular intake of some key nutrients that can help prevent or even alleviate dry eyes over time and all the symptoms of them. And he maintains that in general, people who eat a healthful diet of primarily fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and whole grains, we note the gluten-free need might be there as well, and moderate amounts of fish. And we'll talk about the importance of certain fish oils in a moment, which show a decreased risk for all eye problems. That's an epidemiological observation and association, essentially, whereas there are lots of studies that show key nutrients have a much more direct role to play in dry eyes. Essential fatty acid nutrients, so that's fats, fatty acids, are responsible for producing both the watery and the oily aqueous layers of the tear film. And the best sources of these are, of course, cold water fish, salmon, halibut, sardines, pilchards, mackerel, anchovies even as well, and they're the sources of fats. Now I will just say here that I've made a slight mistake with the nomenclature, is that essential fatty acids, let me get this straight, linoleic acid is the omega-6 essential fatty acid, and alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, is the essential fatty acid from the omega-3 family. Any other fatty acid is semi-essential or non-essential in the sense it can technically be made by the body. In individuals with atopy, where they might lack a delta-6 desaturase enzyme and they can't convert, then sure, these certain fats and DGLA or GLA could be semi-essential or essential. So essentially the nomenclature, I've slightly used the wrong term there, but it seems that, it's used inappropriately all the time in literature, and certainly by myself just now and colleagues of mine too. So it's just important to understand, I think, if we're talking, just so we can help to understand where we're talking, what we're talking about. EFAs is LA and ALA, and anything else is not an EFA, but it might be a semi-EFA, but otherwise it's a non-EFA, but it may still have vital functions. So that's the way to think of it. And EPA and DHA can have vital functions even if they're not essential. Other good sources of ALA include flaxseed oil, which contains 57% ALA, according to most research studies, whereas sunflower seeds, for example, contain a much higher much higher level of LA, linoleic acid. You can grind those up or sprinkle them on foods, etc., to support your intake. Best probably ground in order to obtain the fatty acids, otherwise they'll go straight through. The cofactors involved in fatty acid metabolism, if you remember the cascade of the LA on the left-hand side, let's say, of omega-6, and the ALA on the right-hand side, cascading down to the highly unsaturated fatty acids, require certain desaturase enzymes, as well as elongase enzymes, but the desaturase enzymes require cofactors such as B6, magnesium, and vitamin C. And these have been found, according to Dr. Grossman, the ophthalmic doc, to be supportive for dry eyes. Dry eyes, like most eye conditions, can be caused by excess free radicals or oxidative stress, which is typically more associated with aging, and hence these conditions are much more manifest in the older population than the younger. Poor diet can play a role, lack of exercise, as well as too much exercise, and the obvious unhealthy lifestyle factors such as smoking, excess alcohol, and medications and chronic stress too. So foods rich in antioxidants may help slow down the process of oxidation. And we know these are found in multicolored foods, I'd always err on the side of vegetables first and fruit second, because the fruit sugar, effectively, it maintains taste of sweet things, and I'd rather individuals got their nutrients from veggies, but it's true to say there are some really dense antioxidants to be found in the berries listed here. But particularly for the eyes, it's dark leafy green vegetables and plants such as kale, spinach and chard, yum yum, he says, that are richest for the key nutrients for the eyes, which we'll go into. These nutrients have been found to be low or of value in those with DES, dry eye syndrome. So vitamin D, so that first study by Yoon et al. It seems that low vitamin D levels are associated with dry eye syndrome. This is not the same as giving a vitamin D and then making sure the levels are optimal in patients with dry eye syndrome and then witnessing the improvement of that condition. So it's just simply an epidemiological association. Lutein, which is a macular carotenoid, which we'll talk about in more detail, zeaxanthin, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, copper, EPA, and DHA, which is the fish oil derivative omega-3 fatty acids, have been found to be associated with dry eye syndrome, as well as other eye conditions. So now I'm going to leave the dry eye syndrome behind, and I'm just going to summarize the nutrients which have been most studied in eye health. So these nutrients have been most studied in eye health. I refer again to the macular carotenoids, and they accumulate in the macula that I showed you on the anatomy picture. And those are lutein and zeaxanthin. There's also something called mesozeaxanthin, which is an isomer of zeaxanthin. Zinc, vitamin C, vitamin E, beta-carotene. I'll share some very interesting information, which I think is interesting, about beware too much beta-carotene consumption, and I'll explain the reason why. Vitamin A, and then we have the omega-3 fatty acids, not essential fatty acids, of DHA and EPA, often written the other way around because that's the order of the elongation of the length of the carbon bonds. Bioflavonoids, there are up to 40,000 plus of those in nature. They have an antioxidant effect, but they also support the benefits of other antioxidants, such as vitamin C. Selenium, and there's some interesting facts about selenium and glaucoma, because there's possible contraindications. Chromium, and that's specifically with regard to diabetic retinopathy, as opposed to the other three common eye diseases. Copper and folate, and one can also have too much copper, and we know that copper and zinc are antagonistic to each other as well. So these are the nutrients most studied in eye health. So I guess my question immediately would be, do you know which foods you can eat to ensure a healthy supply of this or these nutrients? I'll leave that one hanging. And we talk about the first of the four most common eye diseases, age-related macular degeneration. It's not my intention to read all the details, but essentially it's the key thing I think here is that it's as you get older, you've got more likelihood of having it, and around 600,000 people in the UK have sight loss caused by age-related macular degeneration. And around 70,000 new cases are diagnosed every year, which means about 200 every day. And if they were diagnosed at the same consistent rate for every hour of the day, which of course it wouldn't be true, it means that 8.33 new cases would be diagnosed in the hour that we're together this evening. Well. So we know that it's a big issue, and if we add up the numbers that are referred to for the various different conditions, it's millions and millions. So it's a hugely important issue, eye health, and it's not going to go away, especially with the aging population. If one extrapolates from current trends of the incidence of AMD, it seems that the population worldwide will grow to between, obviously it's massively different, 100 and 200 million people over the next 30 years. So the importance of this information is not going to go away. It's going to be hugely relevant for the rest of my lifetime. And with age-related macular degeneration, the central vision becomes increasingly blurred, leading to symptoms such as difficulty reading printed or written text, colours appear less vibrant, and difficulty in recognizing people's faces, rather obviously, and that has a direct impact on the ability to function and quality of life. So what causes it? Well, it develops when the macula, which is the part responsible for central vision, is unable to function as well as it could do. It's unclear exactly what causes the damage, but getting older, hence the name age-related, smoking, rather obviously with oxidative stress, and a family history are known to be increase the risk of developing the condition. Those are very, very simple to me and doesn't really go in deep enough. It doesn't seem to affect peripheral vision, which means it will not cause complete blindness, but effectively it can effectively censor an individual's activities and livelihood if it were to occur. Just to share with you this about the kids with autism, you may be aware that some kids with autism it affects their eyesight, or kids with autism have an eyesight issue, and they may be seen to be turning their heads at a 90-degree angle, which gives them a slightly quirky look, and often for me it conveys a rather inappropriate sort of mental health state, which is not necessarily correct, so that the kids turn their heads. And I learned fascinatingly that the G-alpha rods that are involved in eyesight, or central vision, are actually not formed in the absence of vitamin A, and so an insufficiency of cis form natural vitamin A, so it's basically natural form cis form vitamin A, which is a horseshoe-shaped vitamin A, can lead to that lack of central vision due to the G-alpha rods in the eyes, and a restoration of that vitamin A can lead to an improvement in that vision. And I've seen the video of a kid literally 10 days later come back and sit at the desk, and instead of turning his head sideways, which gave him that very odd, quirky look that some children with autism can convey, and actually look straight ahead at the doctor. So really fantastic to find that out, that natural source. And so cod liver oil, which is the only fish oil that will contain cis form vitamin A, because all other fish oils will have been processed, and that affects the vitamin A. So the only natural source of vitamin A is effectively cod liver oil, and not processed fish oils or EPA or DHA with added vitamin A. That's not the same at all. So the cis form vitamin A absolutely crucial for those individuals with autism, just for example, who have the peripheral vision that works and the central vision that doesn't, hence they turn their heads. Moving on to the theme of the AMD, there are two different types. It seems the dry one there is no cure, and the wet one can be treated, but the wet is more serious, and certainly without treatment vision can deteriorate within days. So obviously it's a very significant condition, and currently there is no cure for the dry AMD, so it's basically making the most of what's there, and it's using magnifying lenses and so on, so it's practical help. But there is also evidence that eating a diet high in leafy green vegetables, and of course you'll learn which ones when you stay with us at this webinar, and some fresh fruit with antioxidants can slow the progression of dry AMD, whereas wet AMD can be treated with medication, which helps prevent further blood vessels from developing and adversely affecting the eyesight. So the sooner treatment started, the better. It's not known, and I can't share with you how many years there may be an imbalance existing prior to symptoms manifesting. I'll give you a parallel, if I may, is that in the world of autoimmunity, something I've studied quite a lot, I've discovered that there are blood banks from the US military personnel and doctors and nurses, and then those are called on when something new discovered, or when a study wants to be done with something that they can now test, which they couldn't test before. So there's a new technology or new understanding for a new analyte, or two or three, and they'll go back to plumb the depths of frozen blood banks from years ago. And I learned in autoimmunity that what they did was they found that military personnel who had an autoimmune condition, and then they tracked back their blood samples, which have been given every year, and they identified when the antibodies to the tissue had first manifest and when the first symptoms had occurred. And they discovered that the longest period of time was 9 years of the antibodies existing in the blood. Either 10 years ago it didn't, and 9 years ago it did, and every year subsequently it did, and then the first symptoms appeared 9 years after the antibodies first appeared. So we can see that these things do take a long time to develop. This is autoimmunity, but I don't know the situation with regard to this eyesight issues, and I don't know if the incidence of these age-related eye conditions is actually coming down in age either. So just putting that out there. It's been proposed that antioxidants may prevent the cellular damage in the retina by reacting and mopping up these free radicals that are produced in the process of light absorption. And so in this study, Evans et al., Evans and Lawrenson, looked at antioxidant vitamin and mineral supplements for slowing the progression of age-related macular degeneration in a well-known study, which is acronym is ARED, so it's Age-Related Eye Disease Study, and they've conducted various different assessments within the big study, a bit like the Framingham study or the nurses study, for example. So this is 19 studies that were collected in this assessment in Australia, China, Europe, and USA. These individuals followed supplements for 9 months to 6 years, so quite a period of time, involving about 2,500 individuals. People taking antioxidant vitamins were less likely to progress to late AMD. So this is very good news. And this is antioxidant vitamin mineral supplements, so a positive finding in that one. In the same study, it seems that people with very early signs of age-related macular degeneration who are at low risk of progression, this would mean there would be 4 fewer cases of progression to late AMD for every 1,000 people taking vitamins. So obviously that's a relatively small hit rate, whereas people with a high risk of progression, people with moderate AMD, it would correspond to approximately 8 fewer cases of progression for every 100 people taking vitamins. So again, relatively small numbers, and rather similar to some drug studies, statins and cholesterol, and statins and heart disease, etc. So, but nonetheless, promising an indication of mechanism of how these conditions occur. 6 studies within this group of 19 compared lutein with placebo, and they found that people with lutein or zeaxanthin may have a similar or slightly reduced risk of progression to late AMD. So lutein and zeaxanthin appear to be equally effective. And the next study showed that there's 5 studies looked at zinc with a placebo, and people taking zinc supplements were less likely to progress to late AMD as well. So zinc has a vital role and has long been studied, and at least part of its role is that zinc is required to release vitamin A from the liver. So people with age-related macular degeneration may experience some delay in progression with a multivitamin, antioxidant, vitamin mineral supplementation. So that was the one change, let alone changing their whole diet and their outlook and their stress levels and so on and so on and so on. So very simplistic, very sort of pill for an ill, as it were. Can you imagine what might have happened if they're engaged in all the facts or possible facts that we are aware of that directly influence eyesight? Taking on board all the information I'm sharing with you today and more. I wonder what could happen then, and how much pain and suffering it would save as well. This is an animal study. It was some rodents engaged in a high-fat diet, and they looked at lutein, zeaxanthin isomers, and they had control diet, a high-fat diet, and then those with a high-fat diet with the lutein and zeaxanthin. And there were 28 rats, and they discovered that the rats who took the lutein and zeaxanthin had significantly reduced insulin levels and free fatty acids, which is associated with lower insulin, and it ameliorated the oxidative damage by reducing the oxidative stress and increasing antioxidant enzymes in the retina induced by the high-fat diet. So it seems that the supplementation decreased levels of about 4 key markers: the vascular endothelial growth factor, inducible nitric oxide synthase, nuclear factor kappa B, and intercellular adhesion molecule. We may be familiar with at least some of those. So it seems that the conclusion was that the lutein and zeaxanthin supplementation not only helps to mop up oxidative stress, but it modulates genes involved in oxidative stress as well, including NF-kappa B and NRF2 signaling pathways in the retina, which may contribute to the amelioration of retinal damage induced by the high-fat diet. So this is obviously a rat study, but a point of principle as to how lutein and zeaxanthin can be useful. More on these nutrients. This next study looked at how lutein not only serves as a direct antioxidant, but also activates the NRF2 in this ARPE19 cells, which is a type of retinal pigment epithelial cell line on which you conduct experiments. When I was looking at research for this presentation, I kept on coming across this RP19 cell tissue type, and it seems that this is the cell that's effectively sold to researchers so they can conduct research on it, because it's a reflection of what's going on in the retina. So I have a better understanding of that now. Again, lutein, one of the nutrients of choice for protecting the retinal epithelium. And here we have again the carotenoid. Lutein is a major macular pigment that may reduce the incidence and progression of AMD. We're going to find more out about lutein and about its protective effects. Carotenoids are known to be direct antioxidants. However, carotenoids can also activate cellular pathways, resulting in indirect antioxidant effects. So I've repeated that message 3 times now, so it's So it's hopefully we get to understand that. So the beauty of certain nutrients that it stimulates intrinsic antioxidant pathways within the human body to defend itself, as well as directly. And so it shows that epidemiological research shows an inverse association between levels of lutein and zeaxanthin in eye tissues and age-related degenerative diseases such as AMD and cataracts. So that's a more specific epidemiological assessment rather than looking at what people are eating, but actually looking at the levels within the retina of folk. And coming on to the next eye disease, glaucoma, it's a group of conditions, and it's certainly it can result in damage to the optic nerve and vision loss, and there are different types of it. And it seems that side vision may begin to decrease, followed by central vision, resulting in blindness if not treated. So a very serious condition. And the risk factors for glaucoma include increased pressure in the eye, hence the medication to reduce that, and the eye drops, a family history of the condition, migraines, interestingly, high blood pressure, and obesity. So again, there could be some other factors, and as the ophthalmologist, Dr. Mark Grossman, indicated, is that maybe this is a marker of something else going on inside the body. It's the second commonest cause of blindness worldwide and the leading cause of medically and surgically irreversible blindness. It's an insidious progressive optic neuropathy which affects nearly 90 million people worldwide. I find these numbers overwhelming to actually consider what 90 million people would even look like, let alone what impact it would have on their families and communities. In the UK, glaucoma is the second commonest cause of severe sight impairment registration. The increase in life expectancy we're enjoying in the UK, together with increasing referral of early cases and suspects, has seen a 7 to 8% per year growth in demand for glaucoma service appointments at Moorfields Eye Hospital. So demand is increasing, and as I indicated, these things are not going to go away, and they're going to become more and more prevalent. The sad news is that as we get older, and certainly if we do age longer, whether we're kept alive by medications or maybe healthy eating perhaps and healthy lifestyles, we're going to see more and more individuals whose eyesight's affected. The hypothesis that antioxidants may help is based on the fact that reactive oxygen species and/or a decrease in total antioxidant status, which is referred to as TAS, may have an important role to play in the development of glaucoma. The increase in some antioxidant markers could be protective to protect against oxidative stress in the eyes in this condition. Where I've put references, and whilst you've got the PDF document that you can access here, you do put in the title into your PubMed, and you should come up with the papers that I found. And here are some more references. Now, interesting here, I mentioned selenium earlier on, and that some studies identify a possible link with selenium itself and glaucoma. I do not take additional selenium, certainly in supplement form. So that's interesting, the sort of swings and roundabouts, because selenium is the well-known trace mineral that is a precursor supportive mineral for glutathione. But if one wants to support glutathione, then I would propose that you consider the NAC rather than selenium itself. Here are some more slides, again, not to be read, but just to be made reference to. And so we move on to cataracts. I'll show you the picture. Here we go. It's rather obvious, although the surrounding of the eye doesn't look that old in this individual, but there's a cataract there in that individual. Usually seen in older folk, it's true, and I witnessed actually, yes, hundreds and hundreds of them when I was looking at the Adivasis in the state of Maharashtra in 1994. It's obviously that cloudy area, and it's basically got to do with an oxidized lens, and it may form in one eye or both eyes, and at any age apparently, but certainly it's the older folk who are more likely to have had it. What's interesting with dry eye syndrome is I looked at the causative factors, and it seems that a lack of exposure to sunlight, a lack of it, may actually contribute to dry eyes, and it may be that that's partly to do with the vitamin D story, maybe it's to do with something else, maybe it's to do with the light affecting the eyes in a very positive way, but clearly there's a window, excuse the pun, a window of optimal time that we expose ourselves to full spectrum light with UVB light. So just interesting is that too much can cause a problem and too little can cause a problem as well. Just like what Michael Hollick said, the co-discoverer of vitamin D, when he talked about going out and actually having one's skin go just turn a little bit pink before you go back in again, and or put your sun lotion on. He got fired as a professor of dermatology at the University of Boston because he said that we should go out in the sun for a bit. And so I met him shortly after that a number of times. The progression of age-related cataracts is variable and unpredictable. I'm sure it is. And untreated, it can lead to severe visual impairment. But with surgery, it says 95% of people in the camp in 1994, we had 100% of 1,277 folk regain their sight, which is a fabulous thing to witness. The main symptom is gradual and painless reduction in visual acuity, so that has an impact on our lives. So there's the cataract, and so the associated factors, as perhaps with the other conditions, is age, increased outdoor activity, so prolonged exposure, no outdoor eye protection such as sunglasses or UV protection, high myopia, narrow vision, high LDL and low HDL, so actually a cardiovascular reference there. And I'm wondering whether it's the cause of why the LDL was high and the HDL was low, i.e. systemic inflammation or some sort of inflammation from the gut and or the liver that actually was associated with cataracts due to oxidative stress, as opposed to LDL and HDL being directly involved. It seems that being a female is a negative factor, and in so many conditions that I read about, certainly autoimmunity, it's stacked against women. And lower education level, and interestingly increased pickled food intake, just to share that with you. And it seems in England alone there's 330,000 cataract operations performed each year. Stunning, amazing what skill, and it's such a simple operation by all accounts, but any operation makes me go slightly weak at the knees. It's estimated that 30% of people 65 years or older have some cataract in one or both eyes, again very much age related. Some more stats there. 77% of British people originating from the Indian subcontinent aged 42 years or older have cataracts, again showing that different populations in different latitudes, i.e. different sun exposure, can have different risks. So prevention, what can we do? Well, those who follow a healthy diet that includes lots of veggies and fruits and whole food are less likely to get cataracts, so the evidence tells us. And antioxidants and phytochemicals like bioflavonoids and nutrients such as vitamins A, C, E, lutein and zeaxanthin, we've heard those before, may really help us avoid getting them in the first place. So prevention, and ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And certainly that is true. So really we need to eat lots of fresh whole food, and so fish is recommended. So high in omega-3 oils, fish has been linked to reduced risk of cataracts, just as DHA has been found to be useful in dry eye syndrome as opposed to EPA. It seems DHA has a greater effect for dry eyes than EPA. And so when you're looking at your fish oil supplement, it's quite difficult to know what ratio we put, but most supplements, I guess, produce a sort of 3 to 2 for EPA to DHA. So one needs to look quite carefully to have a higher source of DHA if that's what one's after. You can't simply eat oily fish and get that ratio. You have to then select it from a specific supplement. But there are some companies that produce a DHA dominant or DHA only supplement, and that may be something to consider more appropriately for the eyes than EPA. EPA may have other benefits, and it may be more profoundly anti-inflammatory, for example, in cataract inflammation and pain, compared to DHA. So it seems that whilst they're found together in nature and in many supplements, there are certain companies that have a higher EPA to DHA and some that have a higher DHA to EPA. The Schizophrenia Association of Great Britain, SAGB, used a higher EPA to DHA ratio because it seems that it actually helps to slow thoughts down for the overactive mind, and actually can help to alleviate sort of a depression state caused by an overactive mind, whereas giving a higher DHA might actually speed the brain up and therefore may not be exactly what's required. Interesting, isn't it? And we also then talk about eye nutrients, which includes beta-carotene, and it seems when taken in combination with zinc and other nutrients may reduce the progression of this macular degeneration, as well as cataracts. And we know that beta-carotene is found in carrots, sweet potatoes, and other nutrients and antioxidants, and lutein are found in spinach, kale and squash, and I've got the list for you coming up in another slide. So vitamin A, that really important other eye nutrient, it can protect against night blindness and dry eyes. It's also found typically in animal products rather than, because effectively it's not available in vegetarian sources. It seems that 40% of the northern European population have the genetic SNP or mutation that prevents them from converting vitamin A to, beta carotene to vitamin A, and therefore, as much as one might consume beta carotene, you may not guarantee the conversion to vitamin A. Apparently, having grated carrot with avocado, as you may have learned from one of our newsletters, can greatly enhance the conversion into vitamin A. So that may be particularly relevant. So 40% of the Northern European population have that challenge. So vitamin A, of course, is very important for pregnancy, and many women are warned off vitamin A because of its potential, in high doses anyway, teratogenic effects. But in fact, many women who are pregnant may actually need vitamin A because they can't convert beta-carotene to vitamin A. Move on to coming back to this subject. Bioflavonoids are found in tea, and that's part of the benefits of black tea, white tea, green tea, red wine, citrus fruits and berries, legumes and soy, and they do nourish the eyes. So lots of nutrients. So we refer back to lutein and zeaxanthin, and we need to get the nutrients from food because we don't make them in the body. And I'll show you the list of which foods are most dominant, and I've listed at least four of the top 10 there, and the top lines. Selenium, we know it's in seafood as well as sesame seeds, crab, halibut, and salmon. It's also in Brazil nuts, although I did read a study once which showed that on consuming Brazil nuts, none of the selenium was absorbed. So it was interesting. I need to go back and look at that and see if that was well conducted, but I think they measured serum levels, and whether that's a useful marker or not, I don't know. But it's kind of interesting. And brown rice, well, we know that's unfortunately had some bad press in recent years due to the environmental protection or lack of it, and they found traces of arsenic and lead from the industrial factories that have then fallen down in the rain on the paddy fields and then accumulated in the brown rice. So it seems we're not safe anywhere, but brown rice may not be the best choice, and at least one supplement company that has taken rice out of its ingredient list and replaced it with pea in order to protect against potential contamination. Vitamin C, well known to be rich in sweet peppers as well as potatoes, seems to be the biggest source of vitamin C for the average person in this country, which is slightly concerning in the sense they may not get enough of other vegetables. Strawberries are one of the foods that's most often commonly sprayed, so must get that organic. Broccoli, melon, oranges, and so on. In fact, it's interesting, peppers may be richer in vitamin C than oranges. Eat more salmon, but the wild farm salmon only, because if you eat farm salmon, then you're going to be consuming salmon that's been fed grains or corn, and the fatty acid constituents within it are not going to be the same as they would have been if they were in the wild. Sardines, milk, mackerel, so the milk because of vitamin D. So vitamin D is hugely important for protection of the eyes. And just as an aside here, just to increase your sort of more to do with balance, if you take vitamin D, you can actually create an insufficiency of vitamin A, because a number of the receptors for vitamin A and D are joint. So vitamin D can latch onto the receptor and prevent vitamin A from getting onto the receptor. So you can actually create a vitamin A insufficiency by taking vitamin D non-stop, which is why I typically would optimize someone's vitamin D status, and it's also much easier to measure vitamin D than vitamin A. And then after a month or 2 or 3 on vitamin D, I would then move the individual over to a mixed fat-soluble vitamin formula that contains vitamin A and D. Nuts and seeds contain vitamin E, and sunflower seeds and sunflower oil is a famously rich source of vitamin E. And there's vitamin E, and which is tocopherols, and alpha tocopherol is the most active of the vitamin E family. There's also tocotrienols, which may have superior effects in the body, but in terms of eye health, vitamin E is more profoundly active in the eyes than tocotrienols are. We know that zinc is rich in oysters, and beef and turkey, again, animal products, and this might help reduce night blindness. Zinc is necessary for reducing vitamin A from the liver. And so we move on to diabetic retinopathy, the fourth of the conditions, at least in many complications. High blood sugar through glycation of the lens proteins and the elevated levels of reactive oxygen species causes havoc in the system, and we know that type 3 diabetes is downstream of diabetes. It's Alzheimer's. So in addition to antioxidants already discussed, there may be other nutrients and foods of importance to prevent diabetic retinopathy. So this is particularly where chromium comes to the fore, and it seems that chromium as a constituent part of glucose tolerance factor may decrease the high blood sugar and oxidative stress in both diabetic animals and humans. A number of different studies there on the benefits of chromium, which is why that was included in the list. So now let's talk about more nutrients. So eye health, a function of nutrition. It certainly is. And I'm going to talk to you about this, about DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, and it has essential roles in photoreceptor cells in the retina, and is therefore crucial to healthy vision, not EPA. And it's interesting, and simply by ingesting ALA, you've got no guarantee of converting that into a certain percentage of EPA and then DHA. And actually, I'm not sure I'm aware of whether you can simply take EPA and then have that converted to DHA. So it seems that to have a therapeutic impact, one needs to actually deliver the long-chain fatty acid directly. So the general conclusion of these researchers from 2017 study is that there is consistent evidence to suggest that omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, LC-PUFAs, may act in a protective role against ischemia, lack of blood flow, light, oxygen, inflammatory, and age-associated pathology of the vascular and neural retina. So make DHA part of your diet. Well, we can't do that unless we eat fish, in which case you'll be getting EPA too. We don't know, but certainly it's more likely that if you take DHA as a supplement, the DHA will get through, but I'd always say go food first. And certainly with fish, I'd always recommend go fish first, but I appreciate the seas are polluted and it can become challenging. But Dr. Paul Clayton, PhD, has identified really that fish oils are without the wide variety of polyphenols and bioflavonoids that would exist in the whole fish. And certainly after reading his article, through education, I was turned, certainly moving away from fish oils and more towards fish, and the notion of the sort of the holism of the food rather than specifically. Nonetheless, DHA on its own, I'm not saying one wouldn't eat whole fish as well, could be vital for an individual who needed to have improved vision. Let me tell you about blue light. This is the bad news, and right now is the time I'm just about to put on my, I'll tell you what I'm going to put on in a minute. It's the most harmful light to our eyes, and we're exposed to it every day. And thanks to you watching this webinar, I've just given you another dose. I'm sorry. Artificial light, digital devices, and we're exposed to it all the time without realizing it. And it's not easily filtered by our eyes, and overexposure can definitely negatively impact vision. Every source of light emits blue light, and we're exposed to it all day long, indoors and out. Some blue light could be healthy, but a lot of it, and overexposure of it at any rate, is actually bad for us. And it's the closer you are to the screen, the more negative it is. And the dramatic rise in the use of these smartphones, tablets, laptop computers over the past decade has raised concerns about potentially deleterious effects of increased screen time, which is abbreviated to ST now in the literature, and associated short wavelength blue light exposure. Estimates from large population surveys in developed countries suggest that 35% of people, I would say it's more than that, from my opinion, born between 65 and 96, just including myself, spend at least 9 hours a day. I bet you there are people born before that have more than 9 hours a day too, on some device or another. So for me, when I was reading all this information in preparation for this webinar, it struck me that the eyes may be the most rapidly aging of all tissues in the body and need the most protection and are so important. Couldn't we just do something every day to support them? So it seems that there is a specific photosensitive fluorophore, which is an A2E, you can see the full name on the screen, that mediates lipofuscin phototoxicity. So it has an absorption of around a certain nanometerage, and it's excited by blue light. The photosensitization of this photosensitive fluorophore leads to the formation of reactive oxygen species and to the inhibition of lysozymes' ability to break down cell structures for recycling. So effectively, this is the mechanism by which blue light contributes to something called phototoxicity, something all of us have been suffering from without us even being aware of it, and now I shed light on it. Excuse that pun too. Now, lutein and zeaxanthin come to the rescue. They're the main dietary carotenoids found in the human retina, and they're referred to then as the macular carotenoids. You remember the macular lutea I showed you on the anatomy? So in nature, there are more than 600 carotenoids that have been isolated and characterized, yet only 40 have been detected in human tissues of one kind or another. The percentage of the main carotenoids in human serum is lutein being up the biggest equal with lycopene, 20%, beta-carotene, 10%, beta-cryptoxanthin, 8%, alpha-carotene, 6%, and zeaxanthin at 3%. But the lutein and the zeaxanthin accumulate in the macula more than the others. So researchers can basically identify whether supplementation can improve sleep as well as vision and adverse physical symptoms associated with high screen time, ST. So they looked at the baseline associations of effects of 6 months supplementation with the macular carotenoids, lutein and zeaxanthin, and an isomer, which is referred to as mesozeaxanthin, on the blue absorbing macular pigment, referred to as MP, and measures of sleep quality, visual performance, and physical indicators of excess screen time. 48 young adults with at least 6 hours of daily near-field ST exposure. So we conclude ourselves in that, although we may not be young adults as such, participated in a placebo-controlled trial. So they looked at various different markers and measures, and they found that and they looked at physical indicators as well. They looked at macular pigment optical density, MPOD. It was assessed via a specific photometry method, and they found that the density of it, the macular pigment optical density, was correlated significantly with all visual performance measures. So the thicker it is with the macular carotenoids of lutein and zeaxanthin, the better. And it seems that 24 milligrams a day, remember that figure, of the mixture of lutein and zeaxanthin yielded a significant improvement in this macular pigment optical density, as well as overall sleep quality, headache frequency, eye strain, eye fatigue, and all visual performance measures versus placebo. So a really lovely study looking at the power and the benefit of macular carotenoids, not just for eyes, but also for other markers and measures and symptoms. So increased macular pigment optimal density is good at reducing systemic oxidative stress and inflammation, and significantly improves those visual performance and other physical markers. Now, moving on to this study, I read the study at the Times when it came out, actually, on that Sunday. I think it was Sunday. It's a very interesting review. The Times: lack of sleep will implode your immune system. So interrupted sleep and insomnia are seriously bad for your health, obviously, and blue light can contribute to that. Because of its yellow-orange pigmentation and its location in front of the photoreceptors, the macular pigment also acts as a blue light filter, and that's why the macular carotenoids are so useful. If you can increase the density, you can act as a better blue light filter, and it protects against the photooxidation of the vulnerable lipid-rich photoreceptors that I've been referring to with DHA earlier, outer segments at the back of the eye. So hugely important. And so this the pigmentation mops up the blue light, and we want that the yellow-orange, and that's why the lutein and zeaxanthin are that colour. So this is what I was mentioning earlier on. Not this exact pair, mine are better looking than that, from Amazon. I think it was £9 or £10. And amber shades block out blue light. And I found by putting them on, it actually changes the way that the frequency of my brain. I actually feel naturally more relaxed and less wired. And so yeah, I admit I do wear amber shades after about 9 o'clock of an evening. And I've got them dotted around the house, one in my office room, one downstairs. Don't watch much TV, but there might be one in the room down there. And we've got sort of 5 or 6 pairs floating around the house for us all to put them on. So I'd really recommend you get your pair. I haven't got an Antony Haynes pair, and who'd want to wear that anyway? But I'd recommend you get your own. They're relatively economic, and it may be true that no one will see you in them other than your family anyway. But definitely worthwhile, and just see how you feel, how the impact it has. For me, it's almost like it's almost like switching on some sort of calming sort of waterfall music, in the sense on the effect it has on my brain. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. Now let's look at the top 10 foods highest in lutein and zeaxanthin. That's partly what we've been waiting for. Are you eating the top 10? Is the question. In our select group of Wednesday webineers. That's what we are. The human body doesn't produce lutein and zeaxanthin, so we must get it from the food we eat or supplements. And here's some more references. And studies suggest that the healthy adult needs about 10 milligrams of lutein and 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin. Remember the study that used 24 milligrams and had benefit. And it's estimated we need about half that, possibly, but maybe to make up for the screen time that we engage in, we might need more than that. Now, the majority of the population only gets about 1 to 2 milligrams from diet alone. So how much are you getting? And taking, therefore, a daily vitamin or a daily supplement. I take a little soft gel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week if I haven't had my dose of foods I'm going to share with you in a minute, to protect your eyes. So here's that supplement. It's a cute little red soft gel, and it contains lutein and zeaxanthin, almost identical, not quite, to the dose that was used in that study at 21 milligrams. So a fantastically easy way of ensuring eye protection. And what other organ would you like to protect as much? So hugely relevant and hugely sensible. So unlike perhaps other conditions where one would consider an enzyme or a probiotic or a gut lining remedy or a liver support one way or the other, phase 1, phase 2, I mean, lots to consider. It seems here we're sport for lack of choice, and the lutein 20 milligrams is something I would wholeheartedly recommend you consider for yourself and your family. And if you're not having a portion or a decent portion or two of the foods we're going to be talking about in a second, then maybe it's worthwhile taking one of these. So here are the top 10, and you can read it for yourself. The garden cress is also very akin to watercress, and I myself have tried Swiss chard once and couldn't tolerate it. I've never tried collards, and I probably never will. Similar with turnip green. So there are a number of items in there I'm simply not prone to want to eat. Similar with mustard greens as well. But let me show you the concentration. We can see there's a big difference between what's in kale and broccoli, for example, although broccoli has many other attributes. And are we eating a certain amount per day? So if you spot what are you doing in your diet? Are you having the paprika and the red pepper or cayenne? Of course, we can't eat too much of those, I think, because they're really condiments. And how much watercress are you eating, or kale? Do you eat kale? Do you eat spinach? Do you eat Swiss chard? How much are you eating? And how much can we reasonably eat in a day? I've taken to putting kale on a baking tray so that I can actually get to eat it. And certainly this, preparing for this presentation, it's not only introduced me to lutein 20 milligrams, which I now have a pot of to hand, but I also am going to force myself in a very nice way to eat more kale, curly kale that's slightly crisp but not burned. And here, what I've done now is I've taken the next top 10 foods rich in lutein and zeaxanthin and just shown you again the big difference between what effectively is the top 9 compared to the rest. So even though we may be eating healthy foods, we think, oh, it's celery and it's cabbage and it's peppers and artichokes for the fennel bulbs, and we've got prebiotics, we've got carrots for beta carotene. Well, maybe that isn't good enough. Simple as that. So even though they may have many healthy attributes and bioflavonoids and fibers and soluble and insoluble, you can see there's a top 9 here. And how much of the top 9 can we reasonably eat? How many of us are eating some of the other foods which simply are not going to be common and garden? And how much kale are we eating? So for me, really intriguing. I want to put that into visual form so you could see what was required. Now, interesting, in this study, we move on as we head towards the end of the webinar. Thank you again for joining us this evening. This study showed significant differences in intakes of vitamins C, E, beta-carotene, folate, and vegetables between patients with late-stage AMD and healthy controls. So it's a population-based cohort, and they found that higher dietary lutein and zeaxanthin reduced the risk of long-term incidence of AMD. So it's similar to other studies, so it's reinforcing. The study also confirmed the positive benefits of protection from zinc. Well, I've already shared that with you, and we know that already, but the higher beta-carotene intake was associated with an increased risk of AMD, and that links back to the notion of competition, possible lack of conversion into vitamin A. So beta-carotene increases within tissues, and you can have a degree of keratinosis in the subcutaneous tissue under the skin, and it can displace other carotenoids such as lutein and zeaxanthin. So I guess I refer back to Newtonian physics, really, where there's only a certain space where these things can exist in the body, and if you're ingesting them, so let's just say, well, I eat a lot of carrots or I have carrot juice on a regular basis, well, are you doing yourself a favor when it comes to your eyes? Certainly, if you can't convert beta-carotene to vitamin A, there's a no there. If you have a lack of zinc, you can't release the vitamin A anyway, even if you could convert it from beta-carotene. And if you have the beta-carotene, you may well be displacing the lutein and the zeaxanthin as well. So it's an interesting take on balance, isn't it? Not only do individuals who have a lot more carrots beta-carotene have greater risk of lung cancer if they're smokers, apparently, but this to me is much more relevant. It seems that beware the excess beta-carotene intake with the carrot juices and easy to access sort of carotenoid where you may diminish the lutein and zeaxanthin. So very, very interesting study. The Blue Mountain study in the journal Ophthalmology, higher beta-carotene intake was associated with an increased risk, and in my understanding, It was the opposition that it had to other beneficial macular carotenoids. Zinc plays a vital role with bringing vitamin A from the liver to the retina in order to produce melanin, which is the protective pigment in the eyes. So again, sort of a knock-on effect of one nutrient for the other. Zinc deficiency has been found in those individuals with poor night vision and cloudy cataracts, although interestingly, zinc supplementation on its own did not necessarily help the individual see better at night. I guess one nutrient studies are probably not so useful as multiple nutrient studies. So vitamin A with zinc, with the right carotenoids, may have produced a different outcome. And there is some evidence that zinc supplements slow the progression of AMD and a change in eyesight that comes with age. Yes, it certainly does. Research indicates it's best to obtain these nutrients from food, I would say always. However, it's just simply not possible in certain occasions, which is why I've got my pot of lutein 20 milligrams by my side, and maybe you will too. So it seems that in this study, diets rich in vegetables and fruits appear to be protective against these conditions. Well, that's supporting the information I'm sharing with you, effectively providing antioxidants and bioflavonoids, whereas diets higher in meat and nuts, interestingly, because I guess because the risk of oxidation of the fatty acids in them, leading to oxidative stress, may increase the risk of oxidative stress-related eye disease. And I think it's about balance here. So definitely plant slant, definitely the way to go. So in summary, again, thank you so much for taking the time out. I hope you found it to be of interest. You've learned something, and you're going to go and get some amber sunglasses and some lutein 20 milligrams to make sure your family got protection against what is potentially the fastest aging tissue in the human if you're going to spend that much time in front of your screen. So clearly eye health and vision are essential for good health, but also good community, good relations, and the ability to function in the way that we do. Nutrition plays a key role in eye health and protects against all these common conditions, and it seems dry eyes as well. And it's the very same nutrients that protect against the eye diseases as which protects against dry eyes. And caring for eye health addresses major lifestyle issues, including daily screen time. And we need to get the amber shades out. And blue light is phototoxic. You may have heard it here again, but I've reminded you in no uncertain terms. And so you're either going to eat kale or collard greens on a regular basis, like twice a day, to get your dose, and or you're going to take a lutein supplement to protect yourself, or you're going to step away from the screen. Just move away from the screen. Specific antioxidants which support the macular pigment protect against blue light, and that's lutein and zeaxanthin, which can easily, it seems, be opposed by too much beta-carotene. I remember that study and trial that I did when I was a student at the Institute for Nutrition in 1992, when I took 15 milligram beta-carotene capsule, and I'm already sort of vaguely orange in colour, sort of auburn colour, and I turned myself basically almost like orangutan as I took 45 milligrams a day of beta-carotene. Goodness knows what I was doing to the macular carotenoids. Again, that was an experiment in time, fortunately, as opposed to a lifestyle habit, and it fortunately didn't carry on, but I wouldn't recommend that. So it seems that it would be much better to overdose on the kale, or overdose on broccoli, even or overdose on watercress, than it would be to overdose on carrots. Interesting, isn't it? So we don't know of any negative impacts of having more lutein and zeaxanthin. You're simply going to accumulate more protective pigment in the back of the eye to protect against blue light, so it can be a good filter. And there are a range of nutrients that are vital for optimal function of the eye, but particularly zinc and vitamin A, possibly vitamin E as well. But those four, lutein, zeaxanthin, zinc and vitamin A, although of course there's a whole array of nutrients required, vital for eye health. So that's really come to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for paying attention. Hopefully you've got some key facts from that. So I might just give a quick summary. Yeah, the older we are, the more risk we've got. And that's number one. We must eat whole fresh food. I'd eat more green veggies, and so kale is number one on the list. For me, it's watercress because I can't eat too much kale. Get your amber shades. Get your lutein 20 milligram. And I will refer to another fantastic multi-formula for an individual who you might meet with a specific eye condition that needs a wider array in addition to the healthy start that they can consume. And that's a supplement formula put together by two famous nutritional-oriented doctors, Jonathan Wright and Alan Gaby in America. And they put together something called Occudine, which then was updated to Occudine 2. So Occudine 2 by Allergy Research Group, do check that out if you can on the Nutri-Link Nutri-Link website. You can Ocudyne 2, OCUDYNE2, and it's a fantastic delivering antioxidant multi-formula with lutein, zeaxanthin, and other antioxidants to support support the iron in a rounded way. So just a very few number of supplements, but I really encourage you to continue to do all the good things you're doing in terms of green vegetables. And I wish you the best of eye health. And it's likely that if you do achieve that, that you'll be supporting the whole of your body in a good way too. So I look forward to our next encounter. Thank you so much for listening. I shall end the webinar here. And good night to you.